Thank you for joining us this evening for the Artist Exchange, a group created by and for artists to share new work, ideas, resources, and opportunities monthly over a glass of wine or tea, as whatever you prefer. I'm Shelley Rugg, the gallery coordinator at Gallery Route 1. For our presentation today, we ask that you please stay muted unless requested to unmute. For best viewing, select speaker view from the top right corner of the Zoom viewing screen. And we want you to know that we are recording today's presentation for future viewing on our website and YouTube channel. And now I'd like to introduce our host, Pamela Blotner. Pamela Blotner is an artist, educator, and curator who lives and works in the Bay Area. In her Berkeley studio, she creates sculptures and drawings that explore humankind's relationship with nature, science, calamity, and healing. She has worked as a sculptor illustrator for the Houston Zoo, Houston, Texas, and as an illustrator for Human Rights Watch and UC Berkeley Human Rights Center, Art for Conservation, and the Leatherback Trust. Please welcome Pamela.
Thank you, Shelley. It was very nice. And welcome to our guests, to both Suzanne and Michelle. And I'm going to introduce them very briefly together and say that one of the reasons why we wanted to hear from them tonight is because they're both, at least right now, Californians, although Suzanne wasn't right away. And they are artists, and they are deeply interested in animals, but also in the climate crisis and in animal rights. So I'd like to go right on and introduce a little bit more about Michelle first. Michelle Waters was born and raised in Los Angeles, California, into an artistic and progressive family. Her grandparents were social justice activists and artists who had a big influence on her art and life. She's been making art ever since she was a small child, and her art has been influenced by her environmental and animal rights activism, her volunteer work as a wildlife rehabilitator, and a cat rescuer. Good evening, Michelle.
Hi.
Okay, if you would like to go ahead and show your work and tell us about it, then we'll switch over to Suzanne afterwards.
Okay, sounds good. So thanks for having me tonight. I'm really happy to be here. I love Gallery Route 1 and have exhibited there before. And just every time I come to Point Reyes Station, I make a point to go to the gallery. So I'm really happy to be here. My subject matter has focused on animals for the past 35 years, which is about as long as I've been seriously making art. Some of my artwork is humorous, satirical, and some is not. Some is much more serious and discusses animal rights and our impact as human beings on animals. And the work I'm going to share tonight is more of that nature, and is also talks about my spiritual connection with animals and the earth. And I'm also an environmental activist focusing on wildlife issues. My art and my activism are very intertwined. So this first painting is called Luddites, and it was painted way back in 2002. It's the oldest painting we're going to see tonight. It's part of a series of pieces I did that examine what would happen if non-human animals could suddenly sprout opposable thumbs and take back their world from us. And this painting right now is included in the Peninsula Museum of Art show Art on the Edge, which is part of the Extraction Project, which I know Gallery Route 1 also had a show in this series. And according to the organizers of the Extraction Project, the art seeks to provoke societal change by exposing and interrogating the negative social and environmental consequences of industrialized natural resource extraction. So Luddites, like I said, it was painted almost 20 years ago. It was influenced by my experiences as an activist in the 80s and 90s, mostly in Santa Cruz, and working on a lot of different issues affecting wildlife, including fighting timber harvest plans here in the Santa Cruz Mountains where I live. And the process for this painting, my process has changed quite a bit. The first like 5 paintings you're going to see are going to be acrylic on canvas, and now I primarily work on wood, but still acrylic. And with this one, I actually didn't work out the entire painting in a drawing before I started it. I knew what I wanted to do. I did a drawing of the central part, the bulldozer, and some of the animals. But it kind of, once I got going on that, a lot of it just developed organically and got different ideas for, like, it's kind of hard to see here, I think, because there's a lot of detail, and this is a large piece. It's 40 inches square, but I have bats flying in with sticks of dynamite. I have birds of prey running in, flying in with sledgehammers and monkey wrenches. There's just a lot of little details that I hadn't originally thought of. And like I said, now, you know, usually when I'm gonna start a new art piece, I'll get the drawing pretty well worked out in advance. But back when I was working on this kind of work, I didn't do that as much. So next. So this is called Land of the Free, and it is also acrylic on canvas. It was painted right after Hurricane Katrina. And I think that was the point when I first realized that we are in the climate crisis. It's here, it's now. And I also was feeling very burnout after 5 years of George W. Bush and his oil wars. This is part of a few paintings I did with this similar subject matter that I painted for a solo show at Humboldt State University's Art Gallery, First Street Gallery, in 2005. Next slide. So this is called The Activist's Heart, and it is also acrylic on canvas. I painted it in 2013. And it really represents the grief and so many other people who really care about animals and know what's happening to them feel over what our species is doing to all animals, domestic and wild. In some way, this is a self-portrait, and it was really cathartic to work on. It was really hard to work on, actually. It was really emotional. And I think, you know, for people like myself who are activists, our hearts are tugged and pulled in so many different directions all the time. They're just, you know, we hear about things happening to animals and the earth, and our hearts are always breaking and then rehealing a little when things get better, and we just try and move forward. Next slide. This is called Trees Are the Lungs of the Earth, and it was painted in 2017, another acrylic on canvas. And I was really thinking of how essential trees are for all life, and also for our spirits as human beings. Trees are really important to me. I feel really blessed to live in the redwoods in the Santa Cruz Mountains, where I've lived for almost 26 years, actually. Even though this isn't a redwood tree, it was definitely inspired by my life here in our mountains. And we have all kinds of creatures in here. We have mountain lion and pileated woodpeckers and black bears climbing. We don't have bears in our mountains, of course, anymore, but those are just some of the few creatures that I included in this painting. Next slide. This is a companion piece to the last one. The oceans are the heart of the earth. And this piece is really my love letter to Monterey Bay, which is just such an incredible place. And I know, you know, really, we're just so lucky here in Northern California. We've got basically a marine sanctuary from Mendocino County down to Big Sur. And I've watched, you know, I lived in Santa Cruz before it was a marine sanctuary, and it was full of life. You know, there were a lot of whales, but I really think that protection has helped a lot, because there's just so much wildlife. And I've heard Monterey Bay referred to as the Serengeti of the ocean, which I would say is apt. I think it's, I just really encourage anyone who is able to get out on a boat and go visit our neighbors who come into our local waters, because it's really pretty amazing, the life that's out there. Next slide, please. Okay, this painting is called A Was Land, and I actually don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. I painted it early this year, and it is inspired by and depicts the Santa Cruz Mountains and the endangered apex predator that still hangs on here where I live, the mountain lion. It's an endangered population. The Awaswas people are one of the divisions of the Ohlone people, and I live on Awaswas land. And this piece, I'd been wanting to paint it for quite a while, and as people are probably aware, we had a huge fire in the Santa Cruz Mountains last year in the summer. And I think all of us who live here and nearby have been trying to process what happened. Among other things, large portions of Big Basin State Park were burned. And this was just very cathartic to paint. It was very cathartic for me. And the other thing for me is just mountain lions are very special to me. All cats are very special to me. I volunteer in cat rescue. But I, feel really fortunate to live in a place where we still have mountain lions. And there's a lot of fear around them, and a lot of misinformation. And that is always something that really concerns me. So I wanted to paint this cat, and it's kind of my love letter to the land that I live on. Next slide, please. This is called Consequences. It's another acrylic on wood piece that I painted this year. And I also should have said Awaswas land, this piece and my next piece are much smaller. The first 5 pieces I showed are much larger, but these 3 are like 10 inches by 10 inches. I've been working a lot smaller for the most part the last few years. And some of that is just logistical. It's easier to send art through the mail or through UPS if it's smaller. Some of that is logistical, and some of it is because I have a day job and just different reasons. So Consequences was painted this summer for a group show I was in with the Hinge Artist Collective, which is an art collective I'm part of that has artists from all over the world in it. And I really, the original inspiration was I just had a really beautiful reference photo of a melanistic jaguar and wanted to paint it. And then as I was painting this, the heat dome and the consequent fires happened over British Columbia and the Pacific Northwest. And of course, being in California and witnessing the changes that are happening in our climate here over the past 15 years or so, fire is always very much in my mind. And it came out in this painting. This is called Consequences. Okay, and my last one is called The Scream. I just finished this a couple weeks ago. And I know that somebody said to me, the cat looks like it's yawning, not screaming. And yes, of course, the reference photo that I used, the cat is yawning. But I titled this The Scream. I think I just needed to call it that. I think, we've all been through so much over the last almost 2 years with the pandemic and the political unrest in this country and environmental catastrophes happening all over the world. So it just seemed like a really apt title. And this is an Indo-Chinese leopard and an Atlas moth, which is a moth that's larger than the size of a human hand, just enormous. They're both from Southeast Asian rainforest. It's really important to me when I'm painting things like this to try and depict species who would normally exist in the same area. So researching this, I wanted to do, include some kind of moth, some kind of insect. And of course, there's lots of really beautiful ones from the Amazon, but I didn't want to do that because this cat is not from South America, it's from Asia. So the other thing I wanted to say is, our wonderful rainforests in Southeast Asia are being decimated like crazy for a lot of reasons, but particularly for palm oil, which is ubiquitous. It's in everything. It's, in lots of snack products and body care and household products, and hard to avoid, but it's important for the rainforests to continue existing, and it's important to try and avoid it as much as possible. So, and that is it for me for right now. Thank you very much.
Well, Michelle, thank you. Thank you very much. I know that a lot of us can't wait to ask you questions. But in the meantime, we'll move over to Suzanne. And Suzanne M. Long is originally from Pennsylvania and studied illustration at Tyler School of Art. And she moved to New York after Pennsylvania, but she fell in love with San Francisco and has lived in this area since 1991, making sculpture instead of any illustration, which she infuses with memory, melancholy, and humor, not humans, humor. And from her Vallejo studio. Suzanne too has a deep interest in animals, especially sheep. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming and spending this time with us. So thematically, my work is often about a sense of home. And I think I consider myself a storyteller. And I just fell in love with clay. I think clay is the only medium that I did not study in college. And I fell in love with it when I started working with it. This piece is called Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep. And this, I have these in chronological order. So this is from 2019. I was raised Catholic, so if you were raised Catholic, you might recognize the title of the piece as the sort of prayer that we would say before we went to sleep, which, continues on to be quite terrifying. So I think this is sort of the root of my insomnia was Catholicism. And this is sort of when I first started doing sheep about 2 years ago. Different animals have sort of resonated with me through the years. Monkeys have always been sort of, I think monkeys are sort of at the top for me. But lately I'm obsessed with sheep. So I started the sheep in 2019 and I'm working on them again now. Okay, next image. This is called Fawn, and this is from that sort of same 2019 series. So this piece, usually when I start working, I don't really have a clear idea of where I'm going. And with this piece, when it was still sort of wet clay, it was a finished piece, and it was very sort of meek. And then in the glazing process, it suddenly developed this attitude where it became very fierce. And in this sort of 2019 era, I was mostly using low fire clays and low fire glazes. I often sort of integrate the fabric into my work. And when I first started sculpture, I was doing more mixed media with fiber and clay. And I sort of continue to introduce different mediums into my work. Okay, next image, please. This piece is called Buck. And a lot of my work, it tends to be androgynous. And this is, sort of about gender fluidity and sort of people being targeted for, sort of being on that spectrum of gender rather than at either of the poles. And this again is from that sort of 2019, 2020. And with this piece, I just started really experimenting more with glazing and just not being too concerned with the finished piece and just sort of enjoying the process. I often think of clay as being a very collaborative medium in that it has weight, it has gravity, it will sort of win out, you know, it will warp and explode and collapse, you know, so you have to sort of work with it with you know, with a little bit of respect. Next image, please. This one is called Puddle of Tears. And this is a piece I did after my mom passed away. And one of the things I sort of discovered in that grieving process was the sort of physicality of grief, like the physical pain that comes along with it. And this, you know, this little pathetic fawn sort of was born of that. And then also around this time, I started to like illustrate on my work again. So I hadn't really done a lot of drawing on my surfaces. And I took a workshop with Jenny Mendez, and she introduced me to this like super wonderful brush. And it's just changed my world. So it's interesting how one little thing will just like take you off in a tangent and in a different direction. Next, please. So this is COVID sheep. And this was, you know, right after the beginning of the pandemic. I think this was the first piece I did. I went through a phase of not really being able to work once, you know, I realized the lockdown was going to last more than 2 weeks. And then this was the first piece I did. And it was sort of about this like curious nature of fear, you know, fear of the unknown and how contagious that is. And that it manifested itself in hoarding toilet paper. It just seemed so odd to me. I'm sure there are people all over the country who still have garages full of toilet paper. Next slide, please. So this is a series that I am currently working on, and this is from 2021. And this is a series on climate change. And this series sort of came about because a friend of mine who is a fiber artist gave me these 2 trash bags full of wool. And it just sort of inspired this body of work. I like the juxtaposition of the clay and then the cloud being wool rather than the sheep being wool. And from the side, they're sort of similar in length and in girth, and they have sort of the mirror image of, you know, they're almost like twins. And in this series, these are sort of the evil sheep. It's sort of the, you know, fight of good and evil. Next image, please. And this is one of the good sheep. And this is now my favorite clay. This is Black Mountain, Aardvark Black Mountain. And I just love it. So the good sheep have pinwheels, and the pinwheels are sort of evolving. This one is just made of vellum. I'm working on one now that I'm sort of researching poets who write about climate and the natural world and writing their poems on the vellum before I make them into pinwheels. And, you know, the pinwheels are about, you know, just an alternative reality, you know, that can be clean and strong and, you know, should finally be the choice we make. And then the final image is another series I'm working on called the Migration Series. My house in Vallejo is in a migratory path of migratory birds heading out towards like Highway 37. So I get all kinds of like interesting birds flying over and stopping by. And I have always been inspired by just how active my yard is for being, in suburbia. Um, there's so much going on, and from my studio's in the very back, and I can look down on the trees and see like, all this activity happening. So this series sort of came together because Vallejo is also the most diverse city of its size in the United States. So there, over time, has been this, this wonderful sort of human migration as well. And I'm just sort of trying to like acknowledge both in these pieces. So this is the first of that series. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Suzanne. This is the point when in our program, when the artists get to have at each other, start talking to each other. But I'm going to hog a few minutes because this is something that I would like to ask both of them, and something I thought when I first saw both of their bodies of work. This is a very serious subject, and the rest of the artists who are in the Extraction show that Michelle is in do quite beautiful work, but it's very, it's heavy, it's fierce. So is theirs. But these two artists are not afraid to use humor. And I would like, if you can, you to comment on the role of humor in putting out an idea and how it works for you.
You want to go first, Suzanne? I have to think.
Okay, yes. People often comment on the humor in my work, and I think of it as sort of opening the door to my work, in that it's sort of a safe passage, because when you get deeper into the work, the water might get a little higher, and it sometimes can become a little more challenging. But it's sort of an invitation.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it. And I would say the same. And it's kind of interesting because like of all the paintings I have up tonight that you've seen, the only one that has any humor in it is the first one, Luddites. And maybe I've just been with it so long, it's hard for me to see the humor in it. I definitely have some that I can really see it, but yeah, I mean, it's sort of, it is kind of an invitation. It is more open. And I think, that particular painting for me is expressing really similar ideas to the two that come right after it, to Land of the Free with the animals with the gas masks on, and to my painting, The Activist's Heart. And I also know that neither of those are as accessible. And I think probably the humor aspect is probably why, those are, I mean, I don't know if maybe that's the wrong thing to say, that they're not as accessible, but they're not, I think somebody who wasn't open to the subject matter might have a harder time with those. Whereas a bunch of animals destroying bulldozers is, yeah, it's absurd. It's not going to happen,
Well, one of the things that you and I talked about, Michelle, was your influences. And you mentioned that one of your earlier influences was Sue Coe.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that there are people in our audience who are aware of this British, now American drawer, artist, illustrator, who is very deeply, deeply affected by our treatment of animals. And her work is a very cartoony style, collage and drawing. And when you first look at some of the images, they do look as though it's going to be a cartoon. You're going to laugh, but you don't.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love Sue Coe. She was, I think I discovered her work when I was a very young, early 20s art student at UC Santa Cruz. And I actually was lucky enough to get to meet her once at one of her shows. And I really admire her, and I could never do what she does. Like just that stark, because all of her work, a lot of it's about animals. A lot of it is just about capitalism, war, you know, just all kinds of really painful subjects. And, you know, it would be, I'm not somebody who would be able to just have that focus for as many years as she has.
Well, let me throw this over to Suzanne, because that's one of the things that we did not talk about so much. Who were your influences, particularly when you were making that transition from commercial art to fine art?
So at that point, the first pieces that I was doing, the reason that I transitioned from illustration to fine art as a painter. And then I was writing a lot, and I was trying to incorporate my written work into my artwork. And I was just failing at every turn, two-dimensionally. So my early sculptures are sort of fiber and clay, and they're figurative. The figures are canvas or muslin, and then I would embroider the stories onto the bodies, and then the heads and the arms and legs were clay. And one of the first pieces I did, actually the first show that I had with that work was at the Epperson Gallery, and that was in 96. And I'm now the curator there. And that piece is also in the DeRosa collection. So it was a good nudge into 3D work. But I would probably say at that point, most of my influences were literary. Like I love Jeanette Winterson and Sarah Waters. Joyce Carol Oates. You know, I just love a well-constructed sentence. You know, because it just sets off like this fireworks of visuals.
Makes me wonder if you're familiar with Leslie Dill's work.
I'm not.
Someone to look into. She made a big series of pieces that were dresses, women's dresses, and they were all Emily Dickinson poems.
Oh, wow.
It was quite beautiful because you could read, you know, the poems, but yet you also had, they looked of their time. They looked 18th century.
Yeah.
That time is. So she's definitely somebody you should look into.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's go ahead and open this program to the viewers too. If you would like to say something, I recognize a few of you. Unfortunately, I think Hilda has taken off, but it was lovely to see you if you're still around. And I see Jokey, lovely to see him. I see Tony, lovely to see you. Sally Nelson, always lovely to see another artist I see regularly who does or did a lot of clay work. And I think those are the only ones of you that I see. So please, if you have anything to say, to offer. And I think I find this topic we're on right now very interesting, between literature and visual art. And we all know many artists who do both. So I'd love for any offers of what inspires you, what you're reading, and so on.
May I ask a question?
Please.
Well, I just became very curious when I was looking at Suzanne's work about the missing arms and feet, and just what that is for you. Yeah, just that.
I've been asked this many times, and I've had different answers. Like my answers have evolved over time. Mainly, I think conceptually, I like the simplicity of the figure without arms. And part of that is because hands are so expressive. And compositionally, the hands take your eye away from the face. And with the sitting figures, like with the fawn and stuff like that, I couldn't, it was mainly indecision. I couldn't decide whether I wanted to make like hooves or feet. So I just tucked them under the figure. And I like that it's not another element, that it just sort of disappears and is, suggested. And the piece, the Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep, has the one arm because I needed to hold the sleeping pill. So every now and then I have to throw on an arm or something. And at this point, I'm working on this series of just giant heads. So I eliminated the arm issue altogether.
I really love your piece, Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. And I was not raised Catholic, but I am an insomnia sufferer, so I can relate.
Oh boy, now you started a whole new series, Counting Sheep.
Oh gosh.
It looks like Tony has something to say. Unmute.
I wanted to respond to your question, Shelley, about not having arms. I'm sorry I came in late, so I haven't seen everybody's work, but I know in my own work sometimes, the difference between a human doing and a human being. I think that because our hands are so much about how we do, that not including them would make it be that we're more the essence of being a human without that doing component. And so I wondered, your question stimulated that for me about whether that was true for you, Suzanne, as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've never really done arms, and I've had comments. One woman came into an open studios years ago, and she later sent me an email with a picture of her friend's daughter who was a ballet dancer, and she was born without arms. And she sent me this little video of this girl dancing. Mm-hmm. And it was the same thing. It was just the being, not so much what they're doing. And I had another, I did a series on polio. My mother had polio, and she wasn't disabled, but it affected her life. And someone came into open studios, and he was a young man, and he said that he felt like, in looking at that body of work, he felt beautiful because he felt represented. Mm. And it's sort of like interactions when you show your work, and people bring themselves to your work and share that. I think that's what gives art life. Mm-hmm. Is that like interaction of people bringing themselves to your work. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's funny that you picked up on something very similar, Michelle, in that you gave your animals opposable thumbs. Right. What would they do if they right. had hands?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And some of them have opposable thumbs, and then there's others that are using their beaks or different body parts, because not all animal, the way I paint, where it is, mostly naturalistic, it would be really hard to have birds with opposable thumbs. It's a lot easier with bears and, large animals that can stand on their hind legs, creatures like that.
Well, today I went to the Berkeley Art Museum with my friend Diana, who I think is here, and we saw a series of master drawings, several by Tiapolo, and one of which had a big blob of oil where one of the feet was, and the other feet were not really visible. And so she said to me, well, maybe that's because he didn't know how to draw feet. So hands and feet have very different meanings and very different feelings for us.
Mhm.
All right, well, Pamela, maybe now's a good time to move into the opportunities part of the evening. What do you think?
I think that would be a very good idea. And I myself will need a moment to think about things that are going on around here for people to look into. In the meantime, do others have any ideas? Both in the city, in wherever you are, and so on.
Well, I have one to offer. Right now, a great opportunity exists at Gallery Route 1 to become an artist member. And I'm going to post in the chat some basic information and a link to the application. If anyone is interested in finding out what it takes to become an artist member at Gallery Route 1.
That's
Wonderful.
great. That's something I've thought about over the years, and I live too far away. Otherwise, I probably would have done it a long time ago. I love Gallery Route 1.
Great.
Thanks, Michelle.
There's another opportunity, and maybe either you, Shelley, or Tony will have the details that I don't. And it is a juried show that is being run. And I'm forgetting who the juror is. It's the art members have set it
Jack
up.
Fisher, and it's called Blessed Unrest,
Mhm.
the title of the show. And I'm not sure when the deadline is.
I think it's
I think
passed.
it just passed. Yeah, it was
Oh,
this
yeah.
past weekend. Yeah. Jack Fisher is the juror for that exhibit.
And I don't know, I see most of the people here are fairly experienced. But one of the questions I always got asked by students, particularly graduate students, or people who were coming back into making art out of a long absence, how do you decide which shows you want to enter and which you don't? You know, there are many sources where you can find out about shows, one of which is called Cafe. I think that's a capital C-A small f small e, which is easy to join, but you get several listings of shows that you might want to enter. And if you've been around for a while and you're wondering, should I actually spend this $30, $40? Look at the juror. In this case, Jack Fisher is someone of repute and someone who would be good to see your work. So you might think about that too. Look up the juror and see if this person has a history of getting involved with specific kinds of art and might be drawn to yours.
That's a great tip, Pamela. Michelle, do you have any offers for our artist visiting today?
I unfortunately don't. My cat is putting her tail over the screen. Sorry about that. I don't. It feels like, things are kind of opening up to a certain extent, but not the way they were before the pandemic. But I see that there's something in the chat about, I see. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I wish I had some opportunities to offer, but I just don't.
That's okay. How about you, Suzanne?
I do. So at Epperson Gallery, we are doing a national call for entries. And the theme is, I think Paula will appreciate this, Let the Fur Fly. I believe you were in the first round. So this is a show that Jerry had done several years ago. And it was super successful. And so we're going to do it again. For the last 3 years, we have shown exclusively ceramic art. And starting with this show in 2022, we are going to open it up to paintings and mixed media as well. So it'll be a national call for ceramic sculpture, paintings, and mixed media. And that will be through Cafe. It'll be on the website later this weekend. And the show will be the end of January 2022.
And Epperson is in Crockett,
It
California?
is. It's in
that right?
Crockett, California.
Okay, so it's a lot closer if you do want to go and check it out.
Yes.
That EPP Epperson?
Yes. EPPERSON.
And the juror, who is the juror?
At this point, Jerry and I are thinking of jurying it.
Jerry is,
Jerry is the owner of the gallery. And so the gallery's been there since '96 in many iterations, most recently as a fabulous ceramics gallery. Another thing I'd like to share is if you are not aware of Jen Tuff, Jen was a gallerist who was here in the Bay Area and moved to Santa Fe to open a gallery, which the first show was right as we went into lockdown. And being ever resourceful, she has started an online, it's almost like Facebook for artists in a way, only so much better without any evil. And it's called the Artist Alliance. So if you go to jentuffgallery.com, there will be a link to the Artist Alliance.
is that Jen Tuck?
Tuff, TOUGH. And I'm very excited to go and see the Judy Chicago show.
Me too.
One of my very best friends, Jude Kendall, worked on the Birth Project.
Oh, wow.
With
Wow.
Judy in the 80s, so I'm excited to see the embroidery work that she did.
Excellent. Excellent.
Very nice.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Sometimes we have a viewer from New York, and she's always threatened to give us a New York opportunity, but not yet. We'll see about that. Anybody else? Something we should check out?
I have a question. Am I muted? No, I'm not. I have a question not about opportunities, but because of Suzanne's email this morning, I discovered your group and this venue, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm wondering if there's a distribution list I could sign up for so I know when it happens again.
Well, we do announce it if you're on the Gallery Route 1 email list.
I'll make sure I am. Thank you.
Yeah, and then also on the website, you'll find it under the events tab. We also under programs have information about Artist Exchange, and there is also a Facebook group.
Oh, okay. Well, you covered all bases. Thanks.
Sure.
Well, if that isn't enough, you could email me personally at PamelaBlotner@gmail.com.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. We really want to get this out far and wide. And we've been experimenting, as you know, with time frames and so on. So this week last week we introduced the evening, I'm sorry, last month. Now we're introducing wine. Next time it will be cheese. Okay.
I don't know. The cheese might already be here. No, that's a joke.
Right. Right. Possibly so. Okay. Let's see. Anything that I may have cut off you, Suzanne and Michelle? Any last bit of tech? How you know how one of you made something or what gave you the idea?
Well, I think, back to something that Suzanne was talking about literary influences. I've had quite a few too. And the really obvious one was Edward Abbey, but I'm admitting that kind of grudgingly because the sexism in a lot of his work is really bothersome. But he was an early influence. And another influence is Terry Tempest Williams,
Mm,
who I really love. I love everything she's written and just really resonates with me very deeply. So I think, she's somebody I've just learned a lot from about the value of the natural world. Anne La Bastille, another writer, um, and Annie Dillard.
yes,
Hmm.
yes, absolutely. Um, I read quite a bit and I can't think of anything off the bat, but I do want to recommend another artist, particularly because of your sheep with the wool coming out of the top of its head. This is an artist who lives in San Jose, Stephanie Metz. If you've ever seen her, it's METZ. And I found out about her. It's amazing what you can find just by going to shows that you wouldn't ordinarily go to.
Yeah.
This is the Berkeley Arts Center, and it was a sheep's skull made out of wool, out of needle felted wool.
Oh, wow.
And the most amazing thing was that one half of it was felted very, very tightly, the other very loosely. And in this way, she shared the process with us. And do all of you know about felting or know about hand felting? Okay, okay, just in case anybody from Mars is tuning in who doesn't know. A couple of ways that you can create felt. One is through heat and one is through pressure. So if you threw that wool sweater in your washer and dryer, you now have a tiny felted sweater, okay? Otherwise, they make felting needles, which were developed for industrial use. They're long and they have barbs, so that if you keep jabbing something that's as nappy as lamb's wool, it will condense and it will become so hard that it will be like piano felt if you keep going. But I love the idea of Stephanie talking about the life and the death of the animal and what the animal would leave behind. So I thought that was great. And I called the gallery, and being a discreet gallery, they said, no, we cannot give you her phone number, but we could tell her to contact you, which she did. And she was just starting out. And I was teaching at the time, and I hired her to come and give some workshops to my students. And it was utterly fascinating. And this was maybe 15 years ago. And I fell in love with felting and do a lot of it. And in those days, I could take felting with me on a plane across the country to see my family. All I had to do was put the felting needle right in there with my package of work. I think you would get thrown off the plane if you brought a long barbed needle onto it today. So that's my felting story.
All right. Well, any last words from anyone before we bid everyone adieu?
I feel like I have to mention that I'm going on a cruise next week, and I have decided to bring along with me the complete collection of Dr. Dolittle.
That's great, Jokey.
And, one of the things I've been thinking about is, because I don't really care about how people perceive this, so I just go on about how I talk to the birds at Stowe Lake and stuff. And I worked with somebody some time back, so I don't like those birds. They hiss at me and chase me. And I didn't mean it to sound this way, but I said, well, they like me. I mean, I'll say good morning to them and go, wah, wah, quack, quack, quack. I work with young adults with intellectual disabilities, and some of them have a natural fear of birds and stuff. And I just, foster those relationships. But I was thinking about with the Dr. Dolittle type books, Richard Scarry, other sorts of things. How do they encourage people to develop relationships with animals. And why do some people get very annoyed at the idea that somebody would talk to an animal? It's like, I mean, I tell people this, I said, they may not understand my words, but they understand my inflection, and I seem to get along with them quite well. So
That's really interesting because I live with cats. I talk to them. Um, I live in a place with a lot of wildlife. Sometimes I'll talk to them, but yeah, it is differently. Like there's definitely different kinds of people, and there's a lot of people who would just think that that's just really bizarre to talk to animals. And I do believe that they get the inflection of what you're saying, or the intention of what you're saying, the energy behind it. My husband often will say, the cats can't understand you. They don't understand what you're saying. I'm like, they get it. They get it in a very, maybe not the details, but they get it.
I've heard there's just some crows, apparently they can actually talk like parrots do, and I find that intriguing. I've also heard interesting stories. Crows remember things. There's some little girl keeps getting presents from crows because she helped save one time or something. And as I told my students, I said, you're nice to the birds, all the birds will tell all the other birds, and then they'll like you, and you'll get less chance you'll get pooped on. I said, if you do, it'll be by accident. But I mean, I've seen like Jackson Pollock in some cases. I'm thinking, that bird was going after that person.
Well, on a different level, not a verbal level, I studied animal behavior in the wild, and I spent 3 years in the swamps in Louisiana every day interacting with animals. And I don't necessarily vocalize to them or talk to them, but energetically, I just say, good morning, good to see you. Why don't you come over so I could take a closer look? And if you're in that mindset and that frequency, and you're, positive, and you can connect with them, even without talking to them. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the reasons that I love creating animals, is because they're just like us. We don't have to talk to people to know how they're feeling and what their intentions are. Just my thoughts.
Mm-hmm. I've also
found a lot of interesting spin-offs on the animal themes tonight. Well, I think it's a good time for us to wrap this up. Pamela, you have anything you want to say?
Just that somebody should curate an animal show that's completely about animals or about animal communication. And when I was writing this down, actually Shelley and I collaborate on the outline for these things. I named it The Secret Language of Animals, just intuitively. So maybe there is a secret language, as you, Paula, have indicated, you, Jokey, too. So get one of your friends to curate a show, some wonderful space.
Hey, Pamela, do you know who is coming to the Artist Exchange next month?
That's right. Thank you. So thank you for the reminder. Next month, we are going to focus on public art. That's something that we have never done before. And so one of our guests will be sculptor Vicki Jo Soul, who was actually also in the Extraction show. She does very large steel sculptures, and she will be joined. I haven't got an absolute commitment from him, but with a little luck, cross your fingers, she will be joined by Oakland muralist Daniel Galvez. So tune in for that, and we'll promise to bring a very nice cheese.
All right. Thank you, Pamela. Thank you, Michelle and Suzanne, for sharing your work today. And thank you to all of you who showed up to join us for the Artist Exchange. If you're interested in presenting as an artist in a future event, you can send an email to Pamela. That's Pamela Blotner at gmail.com. And if you were moved by today's presentation and want to support the work that Gallery Route 1 does to inspire people to experience the world in new ways through art, then click on the link in the chat. I'm going to put in the chat. Here we go. And then you can select community outreach donations and then the artist exchange if you'd like to donate. And again, thank you so much for coming. And we look forward to seeing you next month on December 15th for the artist exchange.